I never imagined I'd find myself entangled in a legal dispute with the president of my homeowners association, HOA. Yet, life has a peculiar way of presenting unexpected challenges. It all began 3 months after I settled into Maplewood Grove, a charming suburban enclave characterized by its pristine lawns and homes that seemed straight out of an architectural digest. The HOA was infamous for its stringent regulations, but I assumed that maintaining my property meticulously would keep me in their good graces. How mistaken I was. Margaret Maggie Thompson had presided over the HOA for 6 consecutive years. According to my neighbors, she governed the community as if it were her personal fiefdom. A woman in her late 50s, with a flawless brunette bob and lips perpetually pressed into a thin line, Maggie was on a mission to ensure unwavering adherence to the HOA's rules. Our initial confrontation occurred when I was installing a modest bird feeder in my front yard. I had just fastened it to a tree branch when a deliberate throat clearing behind me caught my attention. "Excuse me, but did you obtain approval from the landscaping committee for that?" Maggie inquired, her tone laced with condescension. She stood there in her beige pantsuit, clipboard in hand, eyebrows arched so high they nearly merged with her hairline. I turned to her with a polite smile. "I reviewed the HOA guidelines, and bird feeders under a certain size are permitted without prior approval. This one complies with those specifications." Maggie's eyes narrowed as she jotted something on her clipboard. "I'll need to verify that. In the interim, I recommend you remove it until you receive official approval." She handed me a violation notice, pivoted sharply, and strode away before I could respond. I chose not to remove the bird feeder. Instead, I emailed her the specific page from the HOA rulebook that sanctions small bird feeders, accompanied by photos demonstrating my compliance. 2 days later, I received a begrudging email acknowledging that no violation had occurred. I hoped that would conclude the matter, but it was merely the onset of Maggie's vendetta against me. In the ensuing months, I received violation notices for the most trivial infractions. My grass being a quarter-inch too tall. My garbage can being visible from the street for 15 minutes post-collection. The color of my curtains allegedly clashing with the neighborhood's aesthetic. Each time, I courteously but firmly refuted her claims, citing evidence from the HOA's own regulations. My background as a corporate lawyer proved invaluable, though I never disclosed my profession to Maggie or other residents, preferring to keep my work life separate. Matters escalated when I decided to volunteer for the HOA board. An open position was available, and several neighbors, impressed by how I had handled Maggie's nitpicking, encouraged me to run. Upon learning of my candidacy, Maggie convened an emergency board meeting. Though I wasn't invited, my neighbor Tom, the board's secretary, later filled me in. She was livid, Tom recounted with a sigh. She spent 20 minutes searching for any rule to disqualify you. When she couldn't, she began making vague insinuations about your trustworthiness. It was uncomfortable, to say the least. I thanked Tom for the information and resolved to proceed with my candidacy. However, Maggie's tactics took a more sinister turn. The day after the board meeting, I returned home to find a notice taped to my front door. It was a community alert warning residents about a person of interest observed loitering near the community playground. While it didn't name me directly, it described my car and the times I usually went jogging, which coincided with evenings when I passed by the playground. The implications were unmistakable, and I was incensed. I had never even paused at the playground during my runs. I immediately contacted Tom, who confirmed that Maggie had drafted and distributed the alert without board approval. Several neighbors reached out that evening, expressing concern about the alert but also skepticism about its validity. They knew me as the quiet, polite individual who always greeted everyone and assisted Mrs. Rodriguez with her groceries. The allegations didn't align with the person they'd come to know. The following day, Maggie escalated her campaign. She created a private Facebook group for concerned parents in the neighborhood and began posting more explicit accusations. Someone forwarded me screenshots, and I was horrified to see Maggie claiming she had evidence of me photographing children at the playground. This was a complete fabrication, but she presented it as fact, even suggesting residents call 911 if they saw me near the playground. I realized immediate action was necessary. False allegations of this nature can devastate one's reputation and life. I consulted with a colleague specializing in defamation law, and we decided the best course was to send Maggie a cease and desist letter, followed by a defamation lawsuit if she didn't retract her statements. The cease and desist letter was delivered to Maggie by a process server the next morning. I detailed all her false allegations and demanded a public retraction within 24 hours or face legal action. I also included a USB drive containing security camera footage from my front porch, showing I was at home during several of the times she claimed I was at the playground. My home office overlooked my front yard, and I had installed security cameras after the initial bizarre violation notices from Maggie. Rather than back down, Maggie doubled down. She sent a community-wide email claiming I was threatening her with legal action to silence concerned parents and that my aggressive behavior only confirmed her suspicions. She even organized a community meeting at her house to discuss the threat to the neighborhood. That was the final straw. I proceeded to file a defamation lawsuit, not against the HOA, but personally against Maggie Thompson. I made it clear in the court documents that she had acted independently, without board approval, and I had no intention of punishing the entire HOA for her actions. The lawsuit detailed her defamatory statements, the damage to my reputation, and included witness accounts from multiple neighbors ready to testify that Maggie's accusations were entirely baseless and politically motivated. As fate would have it, Maggie was handed the lawsuit documents right in the middle of her community meeting. According to Tom, who attended out of sheer curiosity, the color drained from her face as she read through the paperwork. There was a stunned silence before she tried to regain her composure. "She's lying," she sputtered. "This is intimidation, pure and simple. He's trying to take me down because he wants control." But several neighbors had already begun to quietly leave, unsettled by her increasingly erratic behavior. What Maggie didn't know was that I had also filed a formal police report. Falsely accusing someone of being a predator, especially when encouraging others to call the police, goes beyond civil defamation. It borders on filing a false police report, a criminal offense. The local police took it seriously. Within 48 hours, a detective contacted me, and I handed over everything: the cease and desist letter, the Facebook screenshots, the timestamps from my security footage. They began an official investigation. And that's when the skeletons began tumbling out of Maggie's meticulously organized closet. 3 years earlier, Maggie had accused a young couple of drug dealing shortly after they opposed her proposal to increase HOA fees. Police found nothing illegal, but the stress caused them to sell their home and move out within 2 months. Another time, she accused an elderly Korean War veteran of vandalizing the entrance sign because he dared to question her landscaping decisions during a board meeting. Security footage proved he was nowhere near the sign at the time of the incident. The more they dug, the more it became evident that Maggie used baseless allegations as a power play. She leveraged fear and paranoia to neutralize anyone who threatened her hold over the HOA. But this time, her target wasn't backing down. With mounting pressure and a pending lawsuit, the HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to suspend Maggie from her position as president until the legal matters were resolved. She tried to argue that the board didn't have the authority, but the bylaws said otherwise. If the president's actions posed legal or reputational risk to the association, suspension was not only allowed, it was mandatory. Maggie's reign was beginning to crumble. For weeks later, we found ourselves in court. I sat quietly with my attorney, watching as Maggie entered with her own lawyer, still holding her chin high but visibly rattled. During the hearing, her defense claimed that Maggie acted in good faith to protect community members from a potential threat. But the judge wasn't buying it. "Ms. Thompson," the judge said sternly, "the court has reviewed ample evidence, including video footage, social media posts, and sworn testimonies, indicating that you deliberately fabricated allegations against the plaintiff. These were not misunderstandings or misinterpretations. This was targeted, malicious behavior aimed at discrediting and defaming a resident who posed a challenge to your authority." The judge paused, then continued, "Furthermore, your history reveals a pattern of similar misconduct. The court cannot ignore your repeated efforts to silence dissenting voices through fear-mongering and false reporting." The room fell silent. "I find in favor of the plaintiff. Ms. Thompson, you are hereby ordered to pay $75,000 in compensatory damages for defamation, issue a formal retraction in all venues where the accusations were made, and cover all legal fees incurred by the plaintiff." Maggie's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then, like a dam bursting, she exploded. "This is outrageous," she screamed, her voice trembling. "I was protecting our community. He's manipulating all of you." "Ms. Thompson," the judge warned, "you are advised to maintain decorum in my courtroom." But Maggie was no longer in control of the room, of the narrative, or of herself. "He's going to destroy everything I built. This neighborhood needs me. she shouted, pointing a shaky finger in my direction. At that moment, two uniformed officers stepped into the courtroom. The timing was almost cinematic. "Margaret Thompson," one officer said calmly, "you are under arrest for filing false police reports and criminal harassment." Her eyes widened. "You can't arrest me. Do you know who I am?" "I run this place," she yelled as the officers gently took her by the arms. "You used to," one of them replied without emotion. As they handcuffed her and read her rights, Maggie's attorney leaned in, whispering frantically, but she ignored him. Instead, she turned back toward me, her glare sharp and unrelenting. "This isn't over," she hissed. But it was. The community watched in silence as their once untouchable HOA president was led away in handcuffs. Her carefully constructed image, poised, disciplined, authoritative, crumbled in real time, leaving only a woman consumed by her own obsession with power. In the weeks that followed, things changed dramatically in Maplewood Grove. The board held a special election, and I was voted in unanimously to fill Maggie's vacant seat. I never ran for the presidency, preferring instead to help revise the bylaws and build safeguards against future abuses of power. We introduced transparency protocols, established a committee to review all community alerts before they were released, and created an anonymous reporting system for residents to express concerns. More than anything, the neighborhood began to heal. People who had kept their heads down finally spoke up. I saw friendships rekindled, community cookouts resume, and fences, literal and metaphorical, mended. As for Maggie Thompson, she eventually accepted a plea deal. She avoided jail time but was sentenced to community service, fined an additional sum, and barred from holding any position in the HOA or similar organizations for 5 years. She quietly moved out of the neighborhood not long after. Sometimes I still walk past that tree where I hung the bird feeder. It's still there, untouched, a small reminder of where this all started. The feeder became a bit of a neighborhood symbol, actually. Someone even placed a little wooden plaque beneath it that reads, "For every storm, there is a calm." And every time I see it, I smile. Because I remember, no matter how quiet you are, no matter how polite or reserved, you always have the right to stand up, for truth, for dignity, and for yourself.